My name is Bernard Minster. I am a resident of Encinitas in North San Diego County. Numerous friends and neighbors have asked me to share my simplified analysis of Government Code 65915, the so-called California Density Bonus Law, as it might apply to your neighborhood. Please listen to this quick presentation. This is adapted from a presentation to the Encinitas City Council of June 24, which I titled the Density Bonus Whiplash for reasons that will become obvious. The context is Assembly Bill 744, introduced by Assembly members Ed Chow, Bill Quirk, and Assembly member Lorena Gonzalez, that seeks to amend Section 65915 of the Government Code that relates to housing. AB744 has basically two components. One of them is a density bonus. A controversial question which AB 744 intends to clarify in existing law is that density calculations resulting in fractional units must be rounded up to the whole number. It is controversial because of the place where that statement appears in the law, which leads to ambiguity as to when it applies. Some cities choose to round down, and the question is, does it matter? The first thing to realize is that the density bonus calculation is a multi-step process, and the earlier in the process a decision is made, the larger the impact. It is a little bit like a skilled gladiator who can whip a long whip with a very small motion of his wrist. The easiest way to discuss the issue is by example. In this talk, I will use a realistic, albeit not a real, example. Here is the highly simplified example. We look at developing a 5.55 acre property zoned R3. That is, it is planned for 2.5 units per acre at mid-range, 3 units per acre at maximum range. There be commons, 0.5 acres of private roads, and a tenth of an acre of flood water detention basin. This is important because those areas are not explicitly excluded in some municipal codes and could be included as buildable areas. The first step is to calculate the base density, that is the number of units which are permitted on this property. We start with the gross acreage of 5.55 acres. From that gross acreage, we have to remove the non-buildable areas, which may or may not include the detention basin. This results in a net acreage, which in the first case is 4.95 acres, and in the second 5.05 acres. The difference may look small, but remember that this is an early step in the process, and small differences early on may have large consequences. For mid-range density, this translates into a number of units between 12 and 13, a little bit more on the right because of the larger buildable area. Naturally, those numbers have to be rounded to an integer number of units. We can round down, which brings the number to 12 units, whether the net acreage is 4.95 or 5.05, or round up, in which case the number is 13 units for both acreages. That means that the average citizen in a neighborhood has an expectation that 12 to 13 units will be built on this property, which may be the average for the neighborhood. However, should a developer decide to take advantage of the density bonus law, the law specifies that the maximum range, not the mid-range, has to be used, in which case the number of units is substantially larger. Again, there is a need to round, either up or down, and the rounded numbers are 14 to 15 for the left-hand side and 15 to 16 for the right-hand side. Clearly, the most interesting calculation from the point of view of the builder is the one in the rightmost column, which leads to 16 units. And what this means is that the builder in the case will start with a 3 to 4 units advantage relative to the 12 or 13 units that we had, and that's before proceeding with density bonus calculation. To simplify matters, I will only consider two scenarios in the rest of this talk. A scenario that leads to a choice of 14 units to be built, and one on the right with a choice of 16 units to be built. And I will call these two scenarios the round down scenario and the round up scenario respectively. We are now about to enter the density bonus calculation. We will consider only low income units in this example. We will not consider very low income or moderate income situations for which the calculations are parallel. There are two limits we need to take into account. One is that before the density bonus can apply, the number of low income units must be more than 10% of the total number of units. The other limit is that the density bonus itself is capped at 35% of the total, making it uneconomical for a developer to propose a very large percentage of low-income units. So let us consider a round-down scenario. We start with 14 units, and we can make a choice of 1, 2, 3, or 4 low-income units. These numbers, taken as fractions of the 14 number of units we have, lead to percentages that range from 7 to 29%. We immediately see that one low-income unit has a percentage of 7.1%, which is less than 10%, and that falls outside the scope of the law. The cases of 3 and 4 low-income units lead to density bonuses that exceed the cap of 35%, and therefore we have agreed would not be considered by the builder. This means that between the 10% minimum percentage and the 35% bonus cap, the scenario, the round-down scenario, yields only one economically attractive choice of 2 low-income units and a density bonus of 26%. So to apply the density bonus, we take the original number of units, apply the 26% density bonus to get something slightly in excess of 17 units. We have to round down in this scenario to 17 units, which essentially consists of 2 low-income units and 15 market rate units. Consequently, the calculation of the density bonus with rounding down calculations in this case results in 2 low-income units and 15 market rate units. Compared to the 12 or 13 units we had initially, this is between 2 and 3 extra market rate units in exchange for including 2 low-income units. We now turn to the round up scenario on the right hand side, which starts with 16 units. In this case, we still have a choice of 1, 2, 3, or 4 low-income units, although the choice of a single low-income unit gives a percentage of 16, which is less than 10%, and therefore falls outside the scope of the law. At the other end of the range, the choice of 4 low-income units triggers the 35% bonus cap, and therefore we will not consider it, which means that between the 10% minimum percentage and the 35% bonus cap, the roundup scenario opens two options of 2 and 3 low-income units respectively. Application of the density bonus algorithm is straightforward. We start with the 16 units we had, apply a density bonus of 24.5% or 33.5% as specified by the law, depending on the number of low-income units. Calculate a new corrected number of units, which now have to be up rounded to the next integer of 20 and 22 respectively. 20 units is really 2 low-income units and 18 market rate units. 22 units is 3 low-income units and 19 market rate units. So in this simple case of calculating a density bonus with rounding up all calculations, we get 2 or 3 low-income units and 18 or 19 market rate units. So this scenario yields between 5 and 7 extra market rate units in exchange for including 2 or 3 low-income units in the development plan. In summary, this simple example shows that rounding up versus rounding down the base density calculation makes practically no difference in terms of availability of low-income housing. It makes a very large difference in the number of market rate housing units permitted. Our analysis does not take into account the additional impact of local housing ordinances like the inclusionary housing ordinance, which lead to additional concessions and incentives such as smaller setbacks or substandard lot sizes. Let me finish on a recommendation that cities which currently round down should not abdicate local control and should stand in firm opposition to AB744. Letters of opposition should include a clear request for an amendment to the bill wherein the phrase rounded up is replaced by rounded down, or at a minimum by rounded in accordance with local regulations, and this should be in the two places where the phrase appears in the bill. Again, my name is Bernard Minster from Encinitas. I hope this little presentation of AB 744 clarified it for you in spite of the French accent. Feel free to share it with anybody who's interested. I'll take full responsibility for any errors or omissions that I may have introduced within the presentation. Thank you for your attention.